Coming up tonight, the Prime Minister apologizing to passengers forced into quarantine. Meanwhile, education officials reveal that school will be conducted virtually in September. And an opposition MP slams the decision to close Arawa Quay.
Our News is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to Our News and thanks for joining us. I'm Jared Higgs. Topping news tonight, Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis apologized to Bahamas Air passengers from Florida and Grand Bahama who were forced into quarantine after landing at Lynden Pilling International Airport last night. In Parliament this morning, Minnis insisted he was sorry for the stress and duress but called the move absolutely necessary. Jasmine Brown reports.
For the inconvenience, I would like to apologize to those Bahamians who were definitely inconvenienced in that some may have had accommodations waiting for them, and they too would have been placed in such temporary facilities until proper health investigation was completed.
The Prime Minister's apology in Parliament came the morning after Bahamas Air passengers who landed at LPIA from Grand Bahama and Fort Lauderdale last evening were placed in government quarantine upon landing. Passengers had not been advised in advance that they would be placed into quarantine upon arrival.
Obviously, Mr. Speaker, this would have caused great stress and duress and inconvenience for many Bahamians because they would not have known that such a measure had been taken. But I want to assure them that such a measure was taken to ensure the safety not only of themselves, but ensure the safety and the survival of the entire Bahamas.
PM added that officials tried to do their best to ensure there were enough accommodations for those being placed in quarantine. The development comes as COVID-19 cases continue to soar in the country, with Grand Bahama emerging as a hotspot. Grand Bahama will begin a 2-week lockdown on Thursday. Minnis, whose remarks were unscripted, said there was excess travel load as Grand Bahama's borders were closing, and the decision to place arriving passengers in quarantine was made to protect the safety of the country amid a surge in COVID-19 cases. He insisted that had the travelers not been put into quarantine, the Bahamas could have seen rampant infections.
There were excess passenger load of individuals who wanted to come to New Providence. And as a result of that, the health system was essentially overwhelmed. The concerns the health professionals had at that time that individuals, because of the excess numbers of individuals being brought to the capital, many of them would have been lost in the system and subsequently migrate and permeate into the society.
Minnis insisted his administration is determined that a total meltdown will not occur.
The virus is here, it's not going anywhere, and we must deal with it, and we must always try to remain in front of it.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
Thanks, Jasmine. 2 workers at Baker's Bay have tested positive for COVID-19. These confirmed cases were the first on Abaco and came hours after health officials revealed an additional 20 cases of COVID-19, with half of them in the Grand Bahama hotspot. According to the Nassau Guardian, one of those Baker's Bay workers is a Mexican worker who has been on the project for the last 20 days. The other is a Bahamian subcontractor who is a resident of Abaco who recently traveled to Freeport. Baker's Bay brought in 135 Mexican workers in early July to carry out hurricane reconstruction and recovery work. At that time, officials from Baker's Bay said that all the Mexicans had negative COVID-19 tests. Meanwhile, health officials released Tuesday's COVID-19 numbers close to midnight. The new data revealed 20 new cases, including 10 on Grand Bahama, 6 on New Providence, 2 on Bimini, and 2 on Cat Island. Cat Island, Rum Key and San Salvador MP Philip Davis said he's extremely concerned about his other constituents as well.
I am terribly concerned. For example, I was in Rum Key and San Salvador 2 weeks ago, and I inquired about the testing capacity because we are seeing boats coming into those areas, and the nurses, or my information is that, for example, Rum Key has 1 test kit, San Salvador. They're not aware that there are any test kits on San Salvador.
The last of Bahamas Air's relief flights from Florida landed at LPIA this afternoon, with residents being allowed to quarantine at home. That decision comes one day after police officers met passengers on flights from Grand Bahama, forcing them to quarantine at a government facility. Bertha McDermott has the details.
It was a calm scene at LPIA today as 2 flights came in from Florida with Bahamian residents and visitors. They're all saying that they are allowed to quarantine at home.
We met Monet McDalone, a Las Vegas resident who says the process of obtaining a negative COVID-19 PCR test was a hectic one. She came on an American Airlines flight from Miami today. She says she knows that all commercial flights leaving and going into the United States have been halted, but she doesn't mind.
I decided to come because I'm in a long-distance relationship. I haven't seen my boyfriend in about 6 months now, so I want to see him before he goes off to med school and before I finish my senior year of undergrad. So yeah, I decided to take the risk.
Stacey Parson from North Carolina says she's visiting a friend, adding that if commercial flights back to the U.S. are still prohibited when it's time for her to leave, she will charter a plane home. Then there were these residents who returned on Bahamas Air's last relief flight from Fort Lauderdale. Novato Dawkins described the process once he landed in the capital as a nightmare.
It's not sufficient staff. It's really not. It's only 2 nurses sitting down taking data, and then it's one telling you on the line what they're about to do. So I mean, to speed up the process, just have more people available.
However, these residents too say there was no mention of having to quarantine at home. The move comes as a complete about-face by health officials as law enforcement officers intercepted arriving flights from Grand Bahama last evening, forcing all on board to quarantine at a government facility. Government gave no notice or order giving effect to such a move. While some say they were told to quarantine at home, others say they weren't told to quarantine at all.
No, because my test is less than 10 days old.
They tell me I have to quarantine at home with a app they downloaded on my phone with a server.
They said if you have symptoms, so if you're feeling like you might have it even though you got a negative test back, they say to quarantine, but if you show no symptoms and you got a negative result back, they say you should be fine.
They didn't indicate that, but I just, from experience, know that that would be expected.
We also ran into this resident who said he and his son were not in possession of a negative test but is still being allowed to quarantine at home.
We were unable to get tested because of the time frame, so we had to take the option at the bottom that says Bahamian residents must go into quarantine if you do not have a negative test.
Reporting for Our News, I'm Berthany McDermott.
Well, Police Commissioner Paul Roll shied away from questions regarding police involvement in placing those passengers in quarantine. Kyle Joaquin has that.
The question which you asked, I would direct you to Cabinet.
The police commissioner says as it relates to those passengers who were placed in quarantine, he was only asked by Cabinet Office on Tuesday to assist with escorting them from LPIA to the quarantine facility.
I was requested to assist, and I leave that there.
Those passengers boarded the flight thinking they had escaped the lockdown in Grand Bahama, not knowing that they would be placed in quarantine upon landing in New Providence. We understand police met at least one flight on the tarmac and escorted passengers onto a bus for transfer to the quarantine facility.
These matters pertaining to COVID-19 and infections, I'm not the health people, and I stay away from that. It's for them to provide those type of information, and the laws as it relates to health as well also prevents people from divulging personal information about those people. If somebody wants to talk about it themselves, that's fine. So that's why the health officials, they give you numbers and location. That's it.
During his mid-year report, the Commissioner of Police gave the updated crime stats, but also took time to answer questions regarding how police have enforced the emergency orders. According to Roll's mid-year report, over 1,500 people have been taken into custody for some breach of the emergency orders. They've ranged from breaking curfew and not wearing a mask in public to selling coconuts on the side of the street and walking to get water. Roll responded to criticism the police have gotten for arresting people for such offenses, saying officers have been given the authority to use their discretion.
When you stop an individual and the individual is going to give you an explanation, well, then you have to determine whether you're going to accept that explanation or not. Okay? I was driving, and I think my staff could bear me out with it. On the Western Road we were going, and this chap was just speeding, and I'm like, what's the rush, man? Where you going? But he was having an asthmatic attack, and he was trying to get home. I assisted him, and to get home so he could get his nebulizer and, I don't know, to get it done.
Roll insists the restrictions under the emergency orders are there for a reason and that officers will do what they must to uphold them.
If you are out there in the curfew, then you come to there are roadblocks, and the officers will question. If you can't give a satisfactory account of why you're out, then you're in breach.
For Our News, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
The new school year will begin with public school students learning remotely, according to Education Minister Jeffrey Lloyd, who gave this update in Parliament.
Based on the current outlook, the ministry has decided that it would be better, or not probably in the best interest of our staff and students, to begin the new school year by adopting 100% remote or online learning. However, as we continue to monitor the status of health conditions over a period of time, if circumstances permit, we do intend that by October 5th, there may be a possible transition from remote instruction to hybrid or blended model of learning.
Lloyd added that education officials have developed 3 instructional models in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. That has continued to reshape how students are taught. Those models include face-to-face learning, hybrid or blended learning, and online learning. The education minister said there will be a blend of these models.
Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker. The Bahamas is an archipelago. Many schools in different districts and different environments operate differently, though under the same rubric of regulations by the Ministry of Education. Therefore, one size does not fit all. What works best in one scenario may not be best for another. The ideal arrangement is for our children to be engaged in face-to-face instruction.
Lloyd added that no matter what model is used, health and safety standards will be rigidly observed and enforced.
There will be the wearing of masks for children where appropriate, physical distance with a classroom capacity of 20 square feet per student, staggered lunch times, the cancellation of general assemblies where the crowds gather, temperature checks, the utilization of multiple entry and exit points on campuses, and the engagement of buses and other transport vehicles to ferry students to and from campuses.
So to come on our news, the Teachers Union urges government to cancel national exams, plus police reporting a minor drop in overall crime. Stay tuned. Bahamas Union of Teachers President Belinda Wilson is calling on the Ministry of Education to cancel this year's national exams on the heels of the ministry's decision to postpone BJCs and BCSEs once again. George O'Bain reports.
The government was warned by the Bahamas Union of Teachers but chose to go against all logic, according to the BUT president. Belinda Wilson is calling on the competent authority and the Ministry of Education to cancel the sitting of national exams for the rest of the year instead of postponing exams for the second time.
Please, sir, please, Minister of Education Lloyd, cancel the sitting of these examinations for the remainder of 2020. Our children cannot go through much more of this mental anguish. This is going to have a psychological negative impact on our children.
Following the Prime Minister's announcement that Grand Bahama would be locked down for 2 weeks, the Ministry of Education released a statement which read, "The ministry wishes to advise that in an effort to ensure the safety of all concerned and to protect the integrity of the national exams, the 2020 sitting of the Bahamas Junior Certificate and the Bahamas General Certificate of Secondary Education exams is temporarily suspended effective immediately until further notice." Private schools sent notices to students last night advising them not to report to school for further exams. According to Wilson, it only makes logical sense to cancel the exams as every reason the ministry provided for choosing to go ahead with them has proven fruitless.
The reasons they said they will get doing the examinations is for them to matriculate into colleges and universities. Well, the universities of Bahamas and other colleges have already waived the criteria. They said it was for summer jobs. Well, the Ministry of Youth and Sports has canceled the summer job program. They said it's for scholarships. Well, no new students are getting scholarships. So we're asking them to use logic, use common sense.
Wilson also slammed the Director of Education and pointed to the confusion she says will surround the reopening of schools.
And this is a clear example of the Director of Education, Mr. Marcellus Taylor, his ineptness to lead this educational system in an effective manner. He could not lead it prior to COVID-19, and God help us afterward.
Reporting for R News, I'm Georgia Bain.
Crime is down 4% overall, according to the latest crime figures released today by Police Commissioner Paul Roll. For the first half of 2020, murders were down 20% compared to the same period in 2019. Attempted murder is down 67%, rape up 9%, unlawful sexual intercourse down 22%, and armed robbery is down by 34%.
Victims between the age of 18 and 25 represent 35% of all homicides. Conflicts were the most common motive, representing 24%. Tuesdays was the most active day of the week for homicides in 2020. Homicides were more prevalent in the Southwestern Division, which accounted for 19% of the overall total.
As it relates to crime against property, burglary is up 60%, while house breakings are down 13%, shop breakings are up 14%, and vehicle theft is down 9%. Roll was asked to respond to those who dismissed the latest crime figures, seeing that the country has been under curfew for 4 of the 6 months taken into account.
The lockdown, I'm saying, must have had some help with the numbers, because a lot of those places and business places were closed. Okay, that would have been targets. But when you look at the bigger picture, I think you have to give credit to these men and women that you see sitting in front of you.
Still to come, opposition MP Chester Cooper slams Arawak stall closures. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Progressive Liberal Party Deputy Leader Chester Cooper has accused the Minister of Administration of applying discriminatory practices in the decision to shut down business at Arawak and Potters Key Dock.
Today, I can have a meal at the restaurant across the street from Arawak. I can have a meal at restaurants on Cable Beach, but I cannot have a meal at Trudy's or Curly's or Drifters. What is this about? The competent authority must explain. This is pathetic in my view, and something is clearly missing. The scientific rationale has not been put, and therefore it appears discriminatory.
On Sunday, Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis ordered the closure of stalls on Arawak Key and Potter's Key following the confirmation of 49 new cases of COVID-19 in the Bahamas since July 8th. He said they would remain closed until officials are able to ensure that better social distancing can be practiced and enforced. This is the second time the Prime Minister has ordered the closure of those stalls amid the pandemic. Cooper said vendors are entrepreneurs who strive to make a living the right way.
Giving appropriate notice to them of the impending closure, if there is a scientific basis to do so, would be the appropriate way, in my opinion, to do this. We've been at this now for several months. We must get better at it. These people are barely, in many instances, making a living. So who will compensate them for their loss? Where is your heart? Where is your soul? Where is your compassion?
There are no issues between the U.S. and the Bahamas, according to Commander Kevin Self, who said ties between the two countries remain strong.
Nothing has changed between the relationship of the Bahamas and the U.S. government. The support that we have, sorry, my mask, and the support between the U.S. government across all agencies, not just the Department of Defense and U.S. Northern Command, remains very strong.
Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis banned commercial travel between the Bahamas and most countries, including the U.S. Commander Self said the partnership between the U.S. government and the Bahamas is still strong. His comments came as he presented a $100,000 donation of hurricane supplies to NEMA. Permanent Secretary in the Office of Disaster Reconstruction, Carl Smith, said on those islands hit hardest by Hurricane Dorian last year, reconstruction and repairs have slowed down because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
But when one considers all of the situation that we are faced with, in our judgment, we're doing a phenomenal job. So yes, we don't have optimal circumstances, but in many instances, quite a bit of work has already taken place. And we are satisfied that given the resources that we have, the manpower, the financial, the assistance that we're getting from our partners, that we will be in the best situation that we can be in.
Still to come, a Bahamian coach lands a top position abroad. Stay tuned. A Bahamian taking over the head volleyball coaching post at an American university. Marcellus Hall tells us more.
Despite COVID-19, Bahamians continue to get opportunities to showcase their talents abroad. Dakara Moxie, the latest of which, as she now takes over the head coaching job at St. Aug's University. Moxie, a former national team player for the Bahamas, talked about her journey from the Bahamas to now being a collegiate coach.
It started at C.I. Gibson when I started to play volleyball in high school. And through that, we developed a junior national volleyball team. And I was a part of that. Russia was our coach at the time. And it started there.
Moxie also spoke about her plans for the program.
I'm working on recruits for the 2021 year. And also looking on getting the Bahamas national team, just volleyball in the Bahamas, the girls, and because we have a legacy there, at the school. St. Aug volleyball team comprised of Bahamians who, set the foundation of success in the sport of volleyball. And I only at the current moment have one senior that's from the Bahamas. So I would like to, come back and look and recruit and stuff like that and, get it back going,
She added that she hopes to open doors for more Bahamians to come through.
I'm just, like I said, I'm so excited. And to know that, I was educated from Leroy Thompson, he was telling me, because that's my cousin, he was like congratulating me. And he was like, you realize what you've accomplished? And, I'm not thinking to that level. I was like, yeah, I have pursued what I love. And now I'm on a bigger platform to give it back, And he was like, no, that's not only it. He was like, you are following a legacy. So he named the different head coaches that were Bahamians that came before me, and he educated me about them. And I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't even think about it.
All right, so we will continue to wish Coach Moxie the best as she moves forward with her head coaching duties. Reporting for our news, I'm Marcellus Hall.
Thank you for joining us for our news tonight. To catch our news on the go, download the Rav Go Play app. On behalf of the entire news team, I'm Jared Higgs. Have a beautiful evening, Bahamas.